Okay, so one last review of housekeeping, and then we're going to start. So again, welcome to Bitter Creek Virtual Tour. This is a co-product of Friends of California Condors, Wild and Free, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife. We are recording. We're going to ask that everybody keep their microphones muted, just because we have a full house today. And instead, we're going to ask you to type questions and comments in the group chat. You should be able to access that through the toolbar in the Zoom. And we also will be sending links to the recording. There should be a view button somewhere on your screen, and if you click that, you can switch between speaker view, gallery view, and other views. Speaker view is usually the best one for seeing what Daniel is seeing, which will give you the best view of the tour. And now I'd like to just say the mission of Friends of Condors is to enhance public awareness of the California condor, ensure they are protected, healthy, and free. So we're incredibly pleased to have the opportunity to host this virtual tour with Daniel Cook of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Ranger Dan is the park ranger for Hopper Mountain National Wildlife Refuge Complex. His job focuses on engagement, especially with students, and sharing the story of the California condor to help ensure its recovery. Friends of Condors have been lucky enough to work with him on many outreach projects, and we've always been impressed with his ability to engage with young people and the condor story. So, Daniel, take it over.
Right on. Can you all still hear me?
I can hear you fine.
All right. Right on. Thank you for that introduction, Helen. And like she said, we're here at Bitter Creek National Wildlife Refuge, and the refuge isn't open to public access. So typically we do some guided tours with the Friends group throughout the year, but with the pandemic going on, it's a little bit more difficult to get us all together. So we thought we'd try and bring you a short virtual tour today, and we'll drive around, check out some different locations. So I'll be hopping in and out of the call. Have a great day, because we've already got about 9 condors up in the sky soaring around with me, and the weather's beautiful, clear. I can see across the Sierra Nevadas. So we'll have a good time.
We are losing you a little bit with the wind. If you stay closer to the phone and don't aim away.
Oh, yeah. I'm good at looking away and talking. So, right on. Well, I'll try and stay focused here. I get excited with the birds and the views. But where we're standing right now is a place called Pit Trap. And we put carcasses out here to provide a clean source of food, of carrion for the condors. And this place is significant because in 1987, when the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service started to capture wild birds, wild condors, to bring them into a captive breeding program, because the threats to them on the landscape were too much to, ensure their survival. So we had to bring them in. And this hill that I'm standing on right here is actually where they captured the last wild bird, AC9, 1987. And it's a pretty historic spot. At that moment, condors became extinct, which was a really big issue for different folks. Bitter Creek National Wildlife Refuge is on the unceded land of the Chumash people, and the Chumash have a really strong connection with the California condor. California condors don't kill, right? They're pure, they're scavengers. So, and their culture and in their belief, it's a very pure bird. So it's able to get into the upper world. It can soar so high that it can get close enough to speak with Hutash, the creator, and some of these other beings, and send our prayers up. So when we took condors out of the wild, the Chumash, lost their ability to pray and communicate for about 5 years while those birds were in the wild. We were able to bring them back, reestablish that connection, and grow these populations back in the wild, still with a lot of help from the captive breeding program. We're going to turn this way because we've got some condors actually down in this canyon. I'm not sure with the iPhone how well we'll be able to see them, but they're soaring out down here. And California condors, like I was saying, we trapped them all out of the wild because the landscape provides some threats to them that was bringing them to the brink of extinction. right? At one point, there was only 22 California condors in the wild, 27 in the world. We're up now to over 500 birds in total, including our captive population. And a lot of it started right here at Bitter Creek National Wildlife Refuge. This rugged terrain that we see here provides a lot of orographic lift for these giant 9.5-foot wingspans to support these 20-pound birds and soar around, scavenging hundreds of miles a day, sometimes looking for food out on the landscape. And as this landscape changed, over the past 5,000 years and less, as European settlers started moving in, and we started having a more pioneer landscape out here with the introduction of cattle, changing of vegetation to support those cattle and other ranching operations. That impact and that presence has really been was detrimental to condors at first. We brought with us advanced technology, weapons and ammunition. We introduced lead into this environment for the first time a few hundred years ago. And since then, as we've taken the role of the main predator, really, out here in the landscape, providing carrion sources, condors have fed on that. That's their role in the environment, is to clean up our landscape, to clean up that dead stuff that gets out here. Landscape.
We lost you.
Am I gone altogether?
No, the audio went for a minute.
Gotcha.
I'm not sure if it was for everybody, but I don't want anybody to miss what you're saying. So if I can't hear it, I'm assuming they can't.
Yeah, right on. Well, I'll say it back a little bit. I was talking about how as Europeans came in and brought different technologies, including lead, that lead ammunition that we still use today, as we're switching away from it, but that lead ammunition, when it gets out into the landscape, it fragments. It's a really soft metal, which makes it effective for a bullet, for ballistics, for production, and things like that. But when it fragments, it breaks apart into these small pieces. As these condors clean it up, they can get poisoned from that, and we saw a dramatic decline in their populations. Right, we really started to notice in the early 20th century, and then around the 60s, and with the Species Act in 1973, right, we really saw that it was vital to save this species, and that by bringing them out of the landscape. So even though there's some controversy with that decision, like I mentioned, it was vital because we were losing them at such a fast pace. And at that time, we hadn't completely identified or understood the threat and the cause that was leading to all this condor mortality and then dramatic declines in their population. So we took them in, we did captive breeding. After about 5 years, we started releasing birds back into the wild. We still release birds into the wild from the captive breeding program. Saw that we just released 4 birds.
We lost again for a second after you said we're still releasing them.
Gotcha. Yeah, we're still releasing birds. If you follow us on Facebook on the Condor Cave, we've been tracking and sharing about some of those birds that were released from Bitter Creek here at our flight pen across the way, that came from the captive breeding program. So that's really the source of the growth for California condors in Southern California, is that captive breeding program. We have wild chicks that fledge. One just fledged about a month ago across the canyon from us, the orchard draw chick, parents 328, 216, that are real popular birds for the Friends group. 328 was soaring around earlier this morning. Hopefully he'll come back. But we have wild growth, but we also still have that wild mortality. In the last 30 years, about half of condor deaths are related to that lead poison, that lead toxicosis they get from this ammunition. So we really need to continue to work with our conservation partners in the hunting and ranching communities, right? We probably all have friends that like to enjoy nature in those ways, right? Stewarding it and working with it, getting sustenance from it. So
We're losing you again.
that's the great thing about being out in the wild place. Like, cell service isn't great.
Yeah, it's still poor. Maybe just step back away from the edge a bit. I'm not sure. I can hear you a little bit.
Well, I got an idea. I'm gonna stop talking and we'll enjoy this view. Maybe about 5 minutes. Hop off and drive to our next location, a little closer to our flight pen, a little closer to some condors I see.
Okay, thank you. And in the meantime, I'll answer a couple of questions that came in. And I can play a video of the capture of the last wild condor. So we had a question, to what extent do the condors at Bitter Creek rely on carrion delivered to them on the landscape by wildlife managers versus finding naturally occurring carrion? They're capable of finding all of the food that they need themselves. The food that is put out by wildlife managers is put out to provide a clean, safe source of food, because there is a lot of lead in the environment, but also it's used as a management tool to help bring them back to locations. So if they put out food and they have a camera trap so that they can take pictures of animals coming to eat, they can track birds that way and see, maybe there's a bird that they haven't been tracking for a while via its, the tracking devices on its wings, but it comes in to eat at one of these sites, and they can see that the tracker on its wing must just not be working. So it's an additional way that they can keep track of the flock. And also it's a way of moving the flock so that, birds, they might feed out more near a location where they're going to need to trap when they do their annual trap up to check the health of the birds and update their tags. So it's more of a management tool than a need in terms of food.
Yeah, they can definitely find carrion across the landscape.
Yeah, they're very effective at that.
Some of the observed feeding has been cattle. Another third is pig, and then about another 13-14% from deer. So, those are all mostly carcasses that, we're as humans putting on the landscape. So, we've become that primary predator since the Pleistocene. So humans are definitely vital, like hunters and ranchers, as a food source for condors, but our biologists and the food that we put out it's not sustaining their diet. It's there, like Helen was saying, for a clean source of food and to attract them to areas for different, management purposes, like tracking or performing workups, like checking their blood or their equipment, things like that. But yeah, that's a really great question. I'm going to hop off, Helen, and start moving to our next spot.
Okay.
And
I'll play the video and I'll answer more questions.
Yes. And yeah, I'll take some more questions at the next spot too.
Super.
All right. See you guys in just a minute.
Okay. See you. Okay, folks, so I'm going to play a video of the capture of the last California condor, AC9, which was captured at this location at Pit Trap in 1987. So give me 1 second. Okay, so that was the capture of the last wild condor, AC9. So we actually did have somebody ask if the last condor is still alive today, and no, AC9 died in 2016. Unfortunately, it's a tough life out there for condors, especially with lead poisoning being such a high cause of death. It takes out adult birds in a way that you don't see in the normal natural progression. So normally with a bird like a condor, most of the deaths would be young birds that are unsure of themselves, young birds that aren't good at flying, that haven't gotten their kind of confidence yet, that land in stupid places and get taken out by land predators. But once you get to adulthood, birds tend to survive. And so yeah, not much can be done to stop lead poisoning though. Someone else asked, is he going to share his screen so that we can see him in a larger format? So if you're having trouble seeing him in a larger format, you can look for the view option in the Zoom meeting and select speaker view. And he's the only one besides me with an unmuted speaker. So he should be the main screen once you do that, and you can get a big view of him. I'm reading some more questions. Thank you for the detailed info about food sources and management tracking. I heard once that California condors historically fed on a lot of marine mammal carrion washed up on beaches. To what extent is that thought to have been the case, and is that considered nowadays to be a significant difference to their current dietary options? Are condors at Bitter Creek or other reserves observed these days to sometimes find and feed on marine mammal carrion along the coast? Absolutely. I don't think that the Bitter Creek birds go down to the water much at all. They really like steep landscapes, and the kind of breezes that hit those landscapes and create updrafts for them to ride. And that is less in Southern California, in some of the areas near Bitter Creek. One of the places where you see that a lot is the Big Sur population. The Big Sur population has really great steep, wild territory right up to the water, and those birds are seen feeding on marine carcasses quite a bit. And that actually caused an issue for them in that there was DDT in marine carcasses. And so the populations in the Big Sur and the Central California areas that fed more on marine carcasses, those are the birds that had problems with softened eggshells, which is a problem that DDT has caused for a lot of birds. I've got, how long would they naturally live in the wild? Oh, we've got Daniel back, connecting to audio, and I'm gonna have to make sure that he is a co-host again so he can speak.
Okay.
So how long do they naturally live in the wild? I've been told it's about 60 years.
Yeah. So we have yet to observe a condor dying of old age in the wild. I mean, we've only been reintroduced them right in 1992, so it's only been about 30 years. However, the oldest living California condor is condor number 1, Topa Topa. He's at the LA Zoo, and he's over 50 years old and still breeding. So yeah, we believe their natural life is about 60 years. Yeah, but they look about 60 when they turn about 7. So am I coming in with audio good, Helen?
Yeah, I'm hearing you pretty well.
Right on. So here we're at another spot where our biologists track condors using very high frequency radio telemetry, which means we put a little radio transmitter on the tail of a condor with a small antenna, and we have a big antenna called a yagi and a receiver, and each condor has its own little radio station. They don't have very good music on their radio station. It just goes beep, beep, beep. But we can use that to dial in the frequency for individual condors and scan with our directional antenna, and use that to help monitor and locate and identify California condors in the area. And just across from us, above this green here, this cliff face here with the juniper and chaparral, is where our flight pen is, where we do trapping annually, where we bring the birds in to check their equipment, those radio transmitters, their wing tags and GPS units. We draw blood to look at, their exposure to lead. Sometimes we sample a little bit of feather to look at that lead exposure over time. And yeah, we're gonna get over there a little bit later and get a closer look. Earlier, there were some birds hanging out outside the flight pen. We don't have any birds trapped right now. We keep our new releases in there for about 6 to 8 weeks to let them get acclimated with the rest of the flock. Because condors are super social. They need to mingle with the other birds so that they can follow them around to roosting sites, feeding sites, foraging areas, right? Know where the right thermals and orographic lift is so that they can soar effectively. And yeah, so that's going to bring me into some cool condor facts, some anatomy about them. I'm sure some folks in the group that love these birds know a handful of condor facts, but we're going to go over some of the basics real quick. They're the largest land bird in North America with a 9.5-foot wingspan, so almost 3 meters, right? And they use those 9.5-foot wings to soar on thermals, hot air rising, or orographic lift. That's when the wind hits a mountain and pops up, right? And they glide on this wind, on those giant wings, soaring up to 100 miles a day, looking for carrion in the landscape. And those 9.5-foot wings support about 20 pounds of bird. They have a crop, which is an organ in their digestive tract. It's that big, bright red spot you can see on their chest sometimes. And that organ stores food. So they can store up to 3 pounds of meat in that crop and use that to sustain themselves, over time as they don't get to make their food, right? So they have to come across it. So sometimes it might take them a few days when they're nesting, right? They're swapping out with their mate every few days so they can hold food in that crop. So you get a big bird with a full crop, can definitely be over 20 pounds. They get to that full size in just 6 months. So I mentioned earlier, we have an active nest that fledged about a month ago, straight across here. And that chick was hatched back in April. And after about 6 months, it had that 9.5-foot wingspan, weighed probably 19 pounds, just like its mom and dad. And then once it got to that size, shortly after, it took its first flight and fledged. So after they fledge, they spend about another 6 months to a year with their mom and dad, going around the environment, figuring out those places to roost, to forage, right? Learning how to be a condor, basically. And then after that, the bird goes off on its own and joins up with the rest of the flock for a few years until it reaches its sexual maturity, around 6, 7, 8 years old. That's when they go from having that dark black head and the black gray mottled underwings to that typical condor look with the orange, purple, blues, reds, and yellows on that big bald head, those bright white triangle patches up under the wings. We'll talk more about how condors may have gotten that wing according to a Chumash legend when we get down to our bunkhouse where our biologists stay, our volunteers, other partners use that facility while they're out here doing research and monitoring these birds. And yeah, we've got some beautiful artwork down there done by some artists from Cal State Channel Islands that we'll look through and talk more about why condors have those white patches under their wings, according to some legend.
And Daniel, we have a couple more questions if you're up for taking a couple questions.
Yeah, let's do it.
So at what point in numbers will the captive breeding stop? I had heard that it was 2 geographically self-sustaining populations of 150 and at least 15 breeding pairs in each, and a 3rd captive population. Has that changed?
Yeah, so that hasn't exactly changed yet. We're still, that's still kind of the basis of it. There's a lot of work and science and stakeholders and involvement going on to make that final determination of, when we can say condors are, no longer endangered and just threatened, and then from threatened to, completely delisted. And yeah, so some of those discussions are still ongoing, but yeah, those 2 distinct self-sustaining populations, seeing that growth of the population in the wild. Earlier I was saying, right, we're seeing that growth from captive breeding. Our wild population is pretty flat. We get about an equal amount of new chicks as we do birds dying. And but yeah, so as those continue, as we see larger amounts of birds in the population, yeah, we'll start delisting and changing our management practices with
So we have populations now of about 100 in almost 100 in Southern California and in Arizona and Utah, but they might not be self-sustaining yet, and they're certainly not to 150.
Yeah. And those breeding pairs, that can be kind of difficult to measure, right? This year we had 12 pairs attempt nests, and only 2 of those attempts at breeding in the wild, have a successfully fledged chick, right? So we're getting close to having breeding pairs, but whether or not they're all successful and some other criteria are still involved in that decision.
Okay. Someone wants to know if we know the cause of death number 374.
I do not believe that we've gotten the necropsy back for 374. I know there was some information got out about that death on social media. With the service, we really like to give you all solid answers and solid evidence when we have a condor death or exciting news within the population. So sometimes science can take a little while to get those results in. So yeah, we're still waiting on the necropsy that caused the death for that bird. But we'll definitely be sharing that on the Condor Cave. Once
okay, and the Condor Cave Facebook page?
Yeah, that's the Facebook page. It's ran by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the Santa Barbara Zoo. And if you're looking around for information on the Southern California flock, that's going to be your best place to find it. And yeah, we're trying to get better about getting information out quickly, but especially when we're waiting for like a necropsy result, it can just take a little bit of time. But yeah, once we get that information, definitely be putting it out on the Condor Cave and sharing that out, that cause of death. Yeah, every mortality for these birds is really tough. And yeah, knowing that cause of death is important to, that long-term conservation.
Okay, and then the last question right now is, are the surviving birds tested with lead poisoning placed in rehab until the levels in their system drop to an acceptable level?
Gotcha. Yeah. So we've really adapted our management over the years in the program. We used to have field kits that would test for lead levels. And if we saw indications at a certain threshold, we would take those birds in, do chelation for them, which is a treatment for lead toxicosis. course, as the population grew, we learned more about the effectiveness of that treatment and how this lead toxic.
We lost you again a little bit. Can you repeat that?
Yeah. So we used to do those field tests for lead, and then bring birds in for rehabilitation and chelation treatment at a certain threshold of lead levels in their blood. We got 2 condors soaring down here right now, if y'all can see. It's dark behind them, so it's kind of tough, but maybe they'll come give us a good look. But yeah, so we used to do it based off of, a number of lead in their blood. Now we do treatment based more on symptoms. So if we see a bird that is showing symptoms of lead poisoning, that's when we'll try and take it in. So that can be like lethargy if it's not moving, if it's not right, like not flying for a few days. If we trap it and it's showing some rot in the crop, because part of that lead toxicosis can cause crop paralysis, crop stasis. So that organ that it used for digestion, it can't use it, so it can't pass food through, so it can rot out. So sometimes we'll notice that. But yeah, nowadays we wait for symptoms and then send the birds in, usually to the LA Zoo for chelation treatment. And we've definitely had success with that. And we've had times where it hasn't been enough, and we've still lost some of these birds to that lead.
Thank you.
Right, so that was pretty sweet. These birds here, I'm not sure if you guys can see, just above this hill that I'm standing on, the condor flying there, a couple shadows on the hillside.
I occasionally think I see something. Oh, I see it right above the fence line, moving left.
Yes, it's about to pop out over the ridge.
Yeah, it's catching the light. I can actually see it.
See some white underneath.
Oh, excellent.
Beautiful. Second one come in here.
Yeah, I mean, tiny little specks for us, but
yeah, I wish I could zoom in on them for you.
They're flying free.
Yeah, wild and free, like they should be.
Right. Oh, excellent.
Yeah, so we'll enjoy these birds. Maybe they'll even come a little closer for us.
Yeah, the lighting just improved, and I can see them pretty well.
Awesome. Yeah, they are beautiful, beautiful, magnificent birds. Yeah, I can't use my binoculars right now to see wing tags, but I'm guessing that this is 328 and 216. I thought I saw some blue on one of the wings, which would be for 328. There's other 300 birds, but
I've been told that when I talk, the video cuts to me. I just tried spotlighting you, and I'm gonna see if that makes it stay on your screen.
It looks like it's working, yeah.
Super. Thank you, guys. Thanks for letting me know that was happening.
Has anyone in the chat seen California condors in the wild or at a zoo before? Oh, this is great. I don't want to move.
We've got yes on your tours. Oh, wow, they're coming in so quick. I can't read them all.
Awesome.
Yes in Bear Valley. Yes. Just at San Diego Zoo. No. Yes, we live in Tehachapi, and there's a bunch. Someone saw the release of Arizona site. Very exciting. Someone else said the zoo. Very briefly years ago at Big Sur and at Vermilion Cliffs in Arizona. At San Diego Safari Park. Yes, I've seen them. Yes, right over my house in Pine Mountain Club.
Nice.
Yes, at and Hopper Mountain. Someone else went to Pinnacles but didn't see them. Someone saw them at Santa Barbara Zoo.
Nice.
Someone had them circle overhead during a spring equinox ceremony. That must have been magic.
Wow, yeah.
An Arizona release this year at LA Zoo. Oh, someone did nest watching in the early 90s.
Oh, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, another volunteer nest watcher at Hopper. Someone saw them at Big Sur.
Awesome.
Circling over Cajon Ranch, over Old Ridge Route and Casitas. 13 at one time at Hopper.
Wow, that's awesome. That is awesome. Right on. So folks that haven't seen them, now you got some ideas of where you can go look for them. San Diego Zoo, Santa Barbara Zoo, the California Living Museum, Calm in Bakersfield, all have condors that you can see. The LA Zoo does captive breeding, but they don't have any on display. They have one bird in their bird show, a condor you can see. It's a wingspan pretty up close. Man, this is great.
Yeah.
I don't want to leave here, but I do want to. We'll stay for a little while. Right over the grass. Look at that. Topa's at LA Zoo, yeah. But not on public display. They keep their captive breeding program back from the public, so the birds don't get too engaged with like a human presence.
And I'm scrolling back. I feel like I missed some questions, and they got pushed out of the, they got pushed way back by chat. But regarding lead in ammunition, what remains the reason why lead is common in ammunition? Have any entrepreneurs proposed alternatives to lead that could allow phase out or replacement of this component in the market?
Yeah, so lead has been used for ammunition for hundreds of years. It's an easy metal to source. It's soft, so it's easy to shape. The other properties that it has makes it really efficient for ballistics. It spreads and mushrooms really well. Every hunter, they want to provide quick, clean, ethical kills when they do that. So they want a bullet that's going to do a good job of putting an animal down quickly with minimal pain. And lead ammunition, because it's soft the way it can expand, it does a really good job of that. The switch away from lead ammunition to non-lead alternatives, just like anything in life, it can be difficult, to have change. You've used something your whole life, it's always worked. It can be hard to make that change. And the non-lead alternatives like copper, bismuth, steel, those products are out there. In the beginning, they were a lot more expensive. The ballistics, they were still learning, getting them dialed in. There was issues with them not performing as well. But over time, like you're saying, entrepreneurs, different companies have really improved the technology around the non-lead ammunition. It even outperforms lead in a lot of cases. If you switch from lead to non-lead, you might have to make some adjustments on your weapon system because the density and the grain weight is going to be a little different for the same size caliber round. But yeah, so it is out there now. The price is getting, almost equal to the cost of lead for quality ammunition. But yeah, it is still difficult to get a hold of it here in California. It is a law to use non-lead ammunition for the take of animals in California. You can still buy non-lead, use it for target shooting and different things. But the speed limit's 55 as well, and we all know, that doesn't mean we all drive that speed. So we're trying to do a lot of work to help hunters and ranchers, those people that use ammunition in the wild, to understand the ballistics of the non-lead, the impacts that lead has, not just on condors, but other scavengers like bald eagles and golden eagles in the wild. And really get people to make the choice to switch to non-lead, right? And to work together as partners in conservation, right? Hunters are responsible for so much of the funding for state-led conservation efforts. They're the boots on the ground that are out in the environment, noticing things that change, pointing issues out, you know, managing wildlife that preserve our ecosystems, and just reminding the general public and folks of that traditional conservation ethic that comes with hunting, you know, and remembering that we're all on the same side here. We all value these landscapes and these species. We might have different ways that we want to go out and enjoy them, but if we don't conserve and preserve them, you know, there's no debate about, you know, how we go out and enjoy these species and these places. So finding that common value, you know, between everyone out there, you know, to appreciate and love and care for and steward for our natural world. And hunters have been doing that, you know, in our country for over 100 years, and really bringing the conversation in and getting everyone else on board and seeing, you know, the impact, the positive impact, and the ethic that they have when they're out enjoying, you know, wildlife and natural places. I don't know. I hope you guys can see these two condors in the sky here.
It's great.
Yeah, they are flying around. But I think we're getting close to another good time to hop off. And
Yeah.
I think I'm going to bypass our bunkhouse. It's really beautiful artwork. But we won't get any live condors there. And we're having a pretty good show today. So I think I'll head across the canyon above our flight pen and see what we see there. Sound good, everybody?
Okay. Loving it.
All right. And Helen, yeah, maybe you can ask a few people to raise their hands and you can unmute them and let a couple folks share some spectacular stories they have of bumping into California condors in the wild.
Okay.
All right. I'll see you all soon.
Thanks, Daniel.
Hi. So I'm going to go over a little bit of Bitter Creek history while he's going between sites. Historically, the Bitter Creek area was used as a cattle ranch. So that whole area that you're seeing Daniel walking around in was cattle ranch. But it was extensively used by condors during the time that it was a ranch. And it was, like he said, the place where the last remaining condor was captured. There was a point in the 80s when there was interest in subdividing that ranch. And that was when really serious efforts got put together to buy it up and conserve it and make sure that it was protected for condors moving forward. In 85, under the Endangered Species Act, they actually got the funding and bought 800 acres of the land there and called it a refuge. And then in 87, they bought another 11,944 acres of the former Hudson and Hogue ranches and made most of the refuge that we have today. They delineated a border for the refuge that is the land that they can acquire. And gradually they've been working to build the refuge throughout time. So that sometimes means working with willing landowners on land exchanges to consolidate refuge lands. So many inholdings exist within the refuge that they weren't able to buy initially, and they're still owned by private landowners. And occasionally they're able, when landowners are willing to, they're able to do exchanges by having land at the outskirts that's less viable for conservation and condors, traded for land within the refuge that's really central to the refuge. In In all, they've got just over 14,000 acres in fee title, which they own, but the boundary includes up to 23,572 acres. So it's a big area that they're trying to conserve. Some of the habitats in the refuge are California naturalized grasslands, coastal scrublands, juniper woodlands, mixed saltbush scrub, scrub oak woodland, riparian woodland. And you can see that when Daniel's showing the video, those golden blonde landscapes of grass. But then when it drops off at a cliff, you can see it's really dark green. It's just dense woodland. And those woodlands provide the trees that the condors roost in and really make the habitat complete for them. The California condor is one of 9 federally listed endangered species that can be found within the borders of the refuge. Some of the other species are the San Joaquin kitfox, the giant kangaroo rat, and the California red-legged frog. Just checking if Daniel's. Okay, and although they're not endangered, the refuge also supports herds of tule elk, which were reintroduced to the area at Windwolves, which is a wildlife preserve next door. They did releases in '98 and 2005, and the elk have moved over to the refuge. And so that's actually providing another source of food, as elk age out and die or are captured by mountain lions. Their remains can provide food for the condor, and it's the whole circle of life thing. And I'm going to check and see if there's any questions. Susan says hello. Hello, Susan. So then I also have some information on the releases of the condors. So we know that they were captured in 1987 and they were extinct in the wild. They started being released in January of 1992, just about 5 years later. The releases were originally held at Hopper Wildlife Refuge, which is closer to Fillmore, in the mountains above Fillmore. But over time, they decided that Bitter Creek was a more appropriate site. And so that's the main site where they've been releasing in Southern California. California condors are released in 3 main regions in California. One is Southern California, so this release pen that we're about to see. One is Pinnacles, and one is the Big Sur San Simeon kind of release. They're also released in Arizona, Utah. A couple people mentioned seeing the releases there at the Vermilion Cliffs. Those birds go to the Grand Canyon and Zion a lot. And then a 5th site is Baja, Mexico. And there's also been a lot of research being done into releasing them as far north as Oregon. They existed as far north as Oregon historically. There's evidence in diaries and different settlers sort of documenting their presence and the indigenous people as well. And the Yurok tribe has almost completed the preliminary work and have started actually building their release pen and flight pen to do releases in Northern California around Redwoods State and National Parks. So that's really exciting. That's going to be another release site. Public lands provide the core of their habitats around most of these release sites. So they have safety, they have natural lands. In Southern California, that's made up by Hopper and by Bitter Creek, by Carrizo Plains, which borders Bitter Creek, and by Los Padres National Forest on the other side of Bitter Creek, and also by private lands such as Windwolves Preserve to the east of Bitter Creek. In Central California, Pinnacles and Pfeiffer Burns Big Sur State Park provide release sites and habitat. And around the Arizona release, like I said, there's Grand Canyon, there's Zion, there's Kaibab National Forest, and tons of Bureau of Land Management land that provide a lot of habitat for the condors. And last but not least, Baja, Mexico. That release happens in Sierra de San Pedro Martir National Park, which is a beautifully mountainous, remote, rugged region, which really helps create habitat for the condors and a safe place for them to live. So right now, Daniel is on the way to the flight pen, which is where the birds are currently released in the Southern California population. And it is a place where they watch the condors before they get released to make sure that they're not exhibiting bad behaviors. You sometimes get condors that will just sit on the ground. They don't quite get it. And oh, I'm seeing Carmen Ramirez says, I've been to San Pedro Martir Mountains and I've seen the amazing petroglyphs by the native peoples. Yeah, it's I have not been there myself, but I've seen a lot of pictures, and it's a beautiful, beautiful, rugged habitat, and it does not promote a lot of human activities, but it is a really great habitat for something like the California condor that needs the updrafts, what Daniel's been calling the orographic winds. It's when the wind hits a slope and it gets pushed up, and the condors can just ride those updrafts, and you don't see them have to flap at all. It's really amazing. Yeah. So that habitat provides that uplift, much like the cliffs in Bitter Creek or the mountains in Hopper or the canyons in Arizona provide that kind of uplift and that great wind for them to ride. And at the flight pen, the birds are, as I said, kind of checked to make sure that they're not exhibiting any bad health or any bad behaviors. They're usually put in with an adult that acts as a mentor bird and kind of, pushes them around if they're acting poorly, like helps show them the right behaviors and helps kind of keep them acting like condors should act, and gradually getting them used to the idea of the release. If anybody would like to click, just type a little, me in the chat, I can unmute you and we can let a couple people talk about their kind of experiences with condor. If there was a time that they saw one or learned something about them that really made a difference to them. And tell your condor stories. In the meantime, I can talk a little bit about the nesting. There's a nest. Oh, I see Bruce. Okay.
Hi, this is Diane and Bruce.
Hello.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, this is Marjorie. in the late 80s and the early 90s, after they started to bring in the condors, I worked at the LA Zoo. So they had the condors, of course, off exhibit. They would pull the eggs as if they were made of gold and incubate them and use puppets to raise them. But what they had is, some of us were lucky enough that we would sit in this cold trailer at the top of the zoo, near where the condor exhibits were, where the condors were being kept, and watch the nesting boxes they had for them. So as soon as an egg was laid, immediately you had to get on the radio and tell someone, because they wanted to make sure that that precious egg was saved and wasn't broken by, the condors or that kind of thing. And then they, were raised. As I said, the eggs were taken and they were incubated and raised, but with puppets, so that they wouldn't imprint on people.
We actually have one of those puppets in the Friends group. We inherited one from the LA Zoo, and it actually was a parent puppet for real chicks. It fed them, and it's sort of humbling getting to wear it and bring it to outreach events and know, the importance that it had in the early condor recovery program. Now they don't use the puppets anymore. They've determined that, so they used the puppets because they had more chicks than they had couples, because of a thing called double clutching. They would take away the first egg that a pair laid and put it in an incubator and have them lay again, because when a pair of birds loses an egg, they often lay again. And once they had determined that the egg was safe for the parents to take care of, they would have them raise the chick, But that other egg from the incubator was the one that was puppet reared often. As the program has progressed, they've realized that they can actually separate the parents and have each one raise a chick. And so they don't have to have a puppet reared one. They have two single parent reared ones. It wouldn't work in the wild because the parents wouldn't be able to get enough food, but in captivity, with the zookeepers providing food, it's a very effective way of doubling the amount of chicks that a pair can produce every year. And they've even gone so far as to, at the LA Zoo, have some parents raising more than one chick. And that has worked effectively as well. And so they're really good at finding ways to produce as many young as possible in the captive breeding program, to make sure that population is always being pushed back out to the wild, creating the most kind of population bump for the wild that they can. Does anybody else have a story that they would like to share? Someone has asked, Kirk has asked, oh, Renee, go for it. You should be able to unmute yourself now.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Well, my story just comes from having volunteered with the Friends of California Condors, Wild and Free. Helping, attending these events that are at the zoo or at the Wildlife Preservation Spring Festival is extraordinary, just in learning so much more about condors and getting to share that with thousands of people. But the most exciting part has been, of course, seeing condors flying around. And that's occurred when I've had the opportunity to go to places near Bitter Creek and help you guys clean up, the landscaping or whatever needs to be done, brush clearing, etc., and have them, they're so curious, or even working at the little booth that you put up near Bitter Creek in the summer. They're so curious. It seems like whenever we're out there, they come flying over low to say hello or just to check us out and see what we're up to. And to see them flying, 15 or 20 feet above you is I feel like my DNA changes in such a positive way after every experience. It's like nothing else. And I'm a real nature freak. I love camping and being out in the woods and all of that. But seeing those birds nearby flying around is indescribably wonderful. So thank you for letting us help in those ways.
Thank you. And we hope to get back to work days soon. There's just still these pandemic limits. Tours, I think, are going to be a little bit harder because we tend to all group together into just a handful of vehicles, strangers with strangers. But work days we're hoping might be a little easier to start again, because it's usually people arriving in their own vehicles and sort of coming together to do work that's usually outdoors and not clustered, helping with, just various projects that aren't usually Condor related, but help the refuge. And by being there and helping the refuge, we get the opportunity to potentially see condors. So it's always been a real win-win. And I'm hoping that we can get those up and running again within the next kind of spring. And I will definitely send out a message to the mailing list as soon as we know if we can do any of that again. And yes, thank you very much to Marjorie and Renee for sharing your experiences. And I see that Stephen Ferry has his hand up. You should be able to unmute now if you want to share.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah. I first saw condors in the 70s at Mount Pinos. Some friends of mine and I went up to the top of Mount Pinos and camped in the campground there. And the next morning we got up and there were 3 condors roosting in a large conifer close by. So that was really a thrill. That was why we went up there in the first place. And so that was really exciting. And that kind of started my love affair with condors. So I've been following them, reading all the books, and advocating for them, for instance, at Tehachapi, the wind farms at Tehachapi. And then I was a condor nest watcher for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service at Hopper for several years, many years actually. And I found that to be a really great experience. Typically, you would hike in maybe a mile and a half or so, a really, really steep trail, and then you'd sit there all day. In some ways, it was like watching paint dry, but you have the scope set up on the nest, and it was really very relaxing. You just hear the birds twittering, and occasionally the ravens would fly over. One time I was sitting there and I heard ravens squawking really loud, and I got up to see what they were squawking at, and it was a golden eagle that they were harassing. So that was really fun.
Nice.
So, and then I've seen condors, many other places, Pinnacles, Big Sur, Tehachapi's, so many places. So it's Grand Canyon. So I've really enjoyed following what you guys are doing, and I'm hoping to get up to Bitter Creek. That's one place I haven't been yet.
Well, we're hoping to get tours up again, kind of come summertime, but we'll see. If not, hopefully these work days might give you an opportunity. Back before the pandemic, we held them once a month, and it'd be the same day every month, and so people could know, kind of whether or not they'd be available in advance, or plan for it in advance. And usually it's not really hard work. It's really fun kind of camaraderie type work, and very often would see condors, especially with the Bitter Creek work days. But hopefully we can get tours going again soon. But I'm glad that you guys at least got to see some at a distance live condors flying. I see that Sanjay has her hand up. Sanjay, if you wanna, you should be able to unmute now.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Well, thank you to Helen, you and Daniel for doing this, because it's just wonderful hearing everybody's stories and having such an in-depth, I don't know, just investigation into condors. I live in Pine Mountain Club, and my experience with them has just been extraordinary. I am a shamanic healer, and one person that lives near me said that I was doing a healing. I didn't know this, but I was in my room doing a healing, and they witnessed a group of condors circling over my house. I never saw it. But I do, it's happened more than 3 times now. Not at my house, but when I played flute on the Tejon Ranch for the Shelter on the Hill fundraiser, I was playing flute and the sound guy said, don't stop playing, but you've got to look up. If you can look up and keep playing. And right above us, there was an extraordinary sight of a couple of condors, a golden eagle and hawk, all circling, but at different elevations. And that was really spectacular. And then at the Chumash gathering at the top of Mount Pinos, and then when we held a ceremony, like I mentioned in the chat, for the spring equinox, I did a drum circle here in Pine Mountain Club, and we did an opening prayer, and we smudged everybody, and we witnessed 3 condors right above us circling again. So for me, there's such a spiritual significance to all of this, as well as the biological one. So I'm really excited about being able to get back out to the reserve and see them in the flesh, because like Renee shared, they're so inquisitive and they do want to come down and check you out, and they seem to imbue an energy that shifts your perception or gives you medicine, I believe. But oh, and one other little tale, I didn't see this, but a friend was walking at Puerto de Suelo, I hope that I've said that correctly, gateway to the earth, which exists on the Peak to Peak trail between Cerro Norieste and Mount Pinos. And they don't look up very often, but something told them to look up, and they saw a golden eagle flanked by 2 condors flying. And that they were going towards your reserve. They were heading, I suppose it would be due west from here. And they were right over gateway to the earth. And I know that there's a prophecy that when the golden eagle and the condor fly together in the same sky, peace will prevail on earth. Anyway, I thought I'd share that with you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
It looks like Daniel is back, so I'm going to spotlight him now. And Daniel, you should be unmuted and spotlighted.
Yeah, can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me, Helen?
Yes.
Right on. Awesome. Thank you all for sharing in the chat there. Yeah, the last 2 times I've been here at Bitter Creek, we've had a golden eagle, a juvenile golden eagle, come soar around with the condor. So yeah, I hope you're right, Sanjay, about that prophecy that
Yeah.
you know, that means we're gonna have some peace and some restoration. So yeah, so where we started was over here on that hillside there. That's Pit Trap. And then we moved across and down to about this hillside. And now we're up above the flight pen here. And you can see around the flight pen, this is a predator fence that we put in, right? So we can protect these birds There's no birds in the flight pen now. There are a few hanging out on the ground. There one goes right there, taking off. And yeah, I'm gonna try this real quick. See if I can use my camera. Let's see, where am I at? There we go. Here's a little closer look at our flight pen. You can see some condors on the ground back behind it. We use this flight pen to trap birds annually. It's a double door trap, so on the far side there's a smaller pen, and we'll leave that sliding door open for it. And these birds will come in there to feed on the carcass we'll lay out. Once we're in there, we can shut the outside door, and there's another sliding door that opens to the bigger flight pen here. And we can put the birds in here. They have perches. You can see there's like a mock telephone pole in there. There's another one just outside. And those are rigged with a small little bit of electrical wire so that the birds can learn to avoid these power lines. It's been a really, really effective way of teaching them to avoid these power lines in the wild. With that 9.5-foot wingspan, if they take off from a power pole, they can actually touch their wingtips on both sides and get electrocuted. So it's been really successful mitigating that mortality using these mock power poles at the release sites. They sit on it. If they sit on it, they get a really small little jolt, and they learn pretty quickly not to land on those things, which is pretty great. So yeah. So I told you all that I would tell you the Chumash legend of how California condor came to be. And the story starts a long, long time ago, before there was California condors. And the Chumash people lived on Limu, Santa Cruz Island, where Hutash had grown them from some magic seeds. And her husband, the sky snake, who he wanted to help and provide them something after he saw them, living on the island. So he used his forked tongue to shoot lightning and start some fires for the people. And the Chumash were able to use those fires to make food and grow their populations. And they grew more and more fires. And at that time, there was a great white bird known as Wet. He was soaring around and saw this bright light out at Limu, Santa Cruz Island. And being a curious bird, Wit flew over there. As he got closer, he began circling down, and that bright light became darker and darker, and he was engulfed in smoke. And as he realized he was getting too close to the flames, he tucked his wings and turned and flew away back to the mainland. But before he got out of there, his head was burned, left him with a colorful bald head and scar, and his wings were stained from the soot and smoke, except for two small white patches where it tucked its wings to turn and fly away. And that's how we get to know the California condor that we have today, with those black wings, white patches underneath, and that beautiful, colorful bald head. And for the longest time, we've all said that that bald head on vultures and scavengers, right, is to help keep them clean while they're sticking their beaks up in undesirable places. And that might be part of it, right? But there's other scavenging birds like eagles, right, that have feathered heads, and they maintain cleanliness pretty well. We've been learning more and more that bald head of the California condor, that it can puff up with air, deflate, actually works really well for thermal regulation as they soar up to 15,000 feet in the air and then come down on a hillside to scavenge, right? There's a huge change in temperature being up that high in the atmosphere versus being down here on the ground. So as they're going up and down through those radical changes in temperature and pressure, that head can help thermal regulate them, insulate them, and things like that, which is pretty cool. And I like to imagine, that beautiful colorful bald head being created in a fire, millennia ago, like the Chumash story says. And I saw a question in the chat. I couldn't read all of it, but it was asking about how much time do the condors spend getting acclimated. When we trap wild birds in the flight pen here, we try and keep them for less than a week at a time before we work them up and get them back out to the wild. When we get the new releases, like the 4 that just were released over the last couple months from the captive breeding program, we leave those birds in the flight pen about 6 to 8 weeks to acclimate with the area and with wild flock. So that's a big part of this this flight pen and the structure, because condors are so social, right? When the new releases come and we have them inside the flight pen, birds from the wild flock will come and land outside of it, investigate with those birds. They'll look at each other, they'll, you know, mess with each other's beaks and things, and it really allows the captive birds that are getting released to know what the other flocks are, know what the other condors are, so that way when we let them out of that flight pen, they acclimate with the rest of that flock. They do proper condor things, right? Like they go and roost off the ground in a tree. Condors don't do too well falling asleep on the ground where they're, you know, at risk of predation. They take off to the skies with them, learn how to use their tails and their wings really well so that they can control themselves in flight. They follow them around to find areas to forage for food. They learn, you know, that proper condor behavior and hierarchy at a feeding site, right? That brand new, fresh young condor is not going to get the first few bites, right? There's going to be likely an older, bigger condor that's going to push its way in to get that choice meat. Helen, can you read that question from Anya there? I could only see the first few bits of it.
Sorry, I had muted myself. Is it true that condors can reproduce asexually?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is a fascinating question, Anya. Yeah, just recently, the San Diego Zoo released, they published a paper where they've had 2 cases of parthenogenesis, which would be that asexual reproduction. And yeah, kind of like Jurassic Park, right? Life finds a way. And both of these examples of parthenogenesis happened in captive breeding populations. So they had plenty of resources. They had plenty of, you know, they had a mate. And it wasn't discovered until genetic evidence came later that the condors had actually, you know, the females had actually produced their offspring independently without the help of their male partners. So yeah, that was really, really fascinating to see. It's been observed in a few reptiles and a couple other bird species. But with the amount of monitoring and observation we do, and, you know, gathering genetic material for every single California condor, you know, we're really able to see things that, you know, could have easily been missed, right? If we didn't have genetics on all these birds, we wouldn't have been able to identify those markers and see that, you know, the male's markers weren't there in these chicks. So yeah, it's really fascinating that yeah, California condors can reproduce asexually.
We've been asked, are the offspring of the parthogenic healthy?
I don't know. I do not know. I'm not sure the story of those 2 chicks.
Yeah, what I can say from the article, not from my personal expertise, is that they weren't obviously unhealthy. Like there wasn't something about them that set off alarms for the zookeepers. They didn't seem any more or less kind of they weren't particularly healthy or unhealthy in a degree that it set off enough alarms that they would have thought something was strange, but neither of them were particularly healthy, and they both did die a little bit young, whether that's because of parthenogenesis or something else. You know, they didn't confirm, but they weren't those two males weren't particularly healthy.
Yeah, I believe that. Yeah, they did pass away, but they were viable chicks when they were first hatched. Yeah, I know they didn't end up surviving and making their way out into the wild.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think it was clear if that was because of the parthogenesis or if it was other issues. And I saw another question about the wind farm.
Oh yeah, we can do that one. How concerned is the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service about proposed allowing of take of condors at the wind farms in the Tehachapi area?
Yeah, so that's another good question. And the businesses that operate those wind farms have been really great partners with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for condor recovery. They've provided a lot of the GPS units that we use to monitor our birds, and they're expensive units. So they've never had take of a California condor at the wind farms yet. We've never seen mortality from a condor from striking one of those windmills or anything like that. We've done a lot of research on how condors use the space around those farms, and condors seem to be pretty good at noticing them and increasing their elevation when they get close. There's also a lot of measures that that company has taken to really minimize any chance of take of a condor. Those GPS units that our birds wear are connected to a geofence. So there's actually, like an invisible fence out by those wind farms. And if one of our condors comes over there within a mile of any of these windmills, that GPS unit will communicate with that geofence, and it'll actually power down the windmills in the area to minimize the chance of take there. They also have folks roving around with binoculars and trucks keeping an eye out for condors, and if they see one, they'll because not every single one of our birds has a GPS tag, so they'll look out for them and shut them down. So a huge concern. I mean, the farms have been operating for a while. We haven't seen take. They're doing everything they can to mitigate any take of those birds. And I mean, the risk is there potentially, but the companies out there and the service, we're doing everything we can to mitigate that, and we haven't seen any take of condors from those operations out there yet.
And then there's another question from earlier. How would proposed transfer of part of Bitter Creek to a private party affect condor operations?
Yeah, that's a really big question. That could go a million different ways, really. But the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the government, we have these lands like national wildlife refuges, national recreation areas, national monuments, national parks, wilderness areas, right? These are designated lands and they're public lands, right? So the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service owns and operates, right, the acres here at Bitter Creek National Wildlife Refuge. But this belongs to you, the American people, right? This is our backyard here that we hang out at. And we've decided that, national wildlife refuges, their purpose is for, the recovery of habitat and species. And when it, works, we bring people in and allow that access. Many wildlife refuges have a lot of access for hiking, hunting, fishing, all sorts of activities. So the sort of plans around and strategies around public lands isn't usually to turn those public lands over to private holdings. I'm not sure what would happen there. I know we're looking to increase our land, right? So we can manage the conservation and preservation and restoration of some more habitat. That's it depend on who that private landowner is. There would be a lot of discussions, public involvement and engagement with those decisions for us to sell any parcel of public land to a private party, and determining, why that sale needs to happen, how that land is going to be managed and used afterwards. Yeah, but it's an interesting thing to think about for sure. And just the FYI, people were mentioning Mount Pinos. This is Mount Pinos here.
Nice. And I see we can still see the Sierras in the distance. That's the sort of distant horizon.
I believe this is called Bear Mountain here. That's kind of where Bear Valley Springs and Stallion Springs is there. And then we can follow the line up. And yeah, I love when it's clear out here. You can see the Sierras there across the valley.
Do we have any more questions for Daniel? Please feel free to put them in the chat.
And yeah, this will be our last location here. So yeah, we can hang out for up to another 30 minutes if we'd like. People can share, ask questions. Yeah.
And what I'd like to say is, for folks that have visited or have interest in visiting our roadside viewing kiosk that the Friends do in the kind of spring and summer, the spot that we set that up is right behind where Daniel is, up the hill. So it's a similar view that you're getting. You just can't see the flight pen from the road. But that's the reason that we set it up there, because it's right next to the refuge. It's right near the flight pen, and it's one of the best spots that there is for public viewing of condors. We usually see a handful every time we do that event. So if you've been to that, that's why this view might seem a little bit familiar.
And there's some condors there at the edge of the flight pad. There's also some crows and ravens down there, but it looks like
the three big dots are condors?
3 big there and then 2 there on the side.
Okay. I thought that the 2 on the side were a log. Because they're so close together. They kind of look like a curved log.
Yeah.
It's great when there are birds inside, perched on the perches inside, and the wild condors come and they'll land on top of that flight pen, and they're so interested, they're so social. They're checking out the birds inside, either because they know them and they're like, hey, what you doing in there? Or because they're new and it's like, whoa, new kid on the block. Like, it's amazing seeing how social these creatures are. Someone said, I presume found feathers and feathers from deceased birds all go to the Native American repository.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, the non-eagle repository is where any found feathers should go. Condor feathers, just like all bird feathers, that you can't shoot, right? So if it's a game bird, those feathers you can legally own, but if it's not a game bird, any migratory bird, endangered species, yeah, those feathers, yeah, if you find them, leave them where they are. You can't keep them or own them. Federally recognized tribes can get authorization to have feathers for different reasons, different purposes, and they have to go through that Native American non-eagle or eagle repository, depending on the feathers they're looking for. Get some that way.
And then certain organizations can get permits to have a feather. Like the Friends of Condors applied, and we have a couple of feathers for educational purposes, but we had to get permits from the Fish and Wildlife Service and request those. And you get, museums and things like that have permits to have some.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to throw that in there so that if anybody comes to one of our tables in the future and sees our feathers, they aren't like, what?
Yeah, right.
We've got when the tours resume, is there a limited amount of sign up for those, and how long in advance will we be notified before the event? Usually we notify a couple weeks before the event, and we're limited to 24 people. And so we stop letting people sign up after, kind of just over 24. So we'll have a small waiting list in case people drop off. But the reason for that limited number is because, unlike today, where it's virtual, when it's a live tour, all of those people are with Daniel near the flight pen, and we need to minimize disturbance. So, there's a cost benefit of, we want people to have the experience and, gain that appreciation for the land and the birds, and have the, joy of seeing them, but not at the expense of causing excess, disturbance. So yeah, that would be 24 people. And we've been asked, how common is it for condors to fight over territory and cause the death of another condor, like what happened with 75? Is that because 374, the male, wasn't around?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I think the science is still out on that, right? We have to do a lot more observations before we can, really state something as known or the way it is, right? But we do see condors, they will defend a nest territory a little bit, right? They don't want other birds right around an active nest cavity that they're in. So we will see some of that. We did see, as some of y'all mentioned and saw on the cams, right, some adult birds come in and harass some chicks, right, to some pretty extreme cases. But yeah, that's not something we've observed very often, of a adult condor coming in and harassing a chick, to the point of that chick dying. Yeah, the verdict is that we haven't observed it enough to know how normal or expected it is, but we will see them, sort of defend off a nesting territory, a canyon area or something that they're actively nesting in from other birds.
Thank you. We also got a question about the viewing booth. Is there a scheduled start date for the viewing booth at Bitter Creek? It's the first and third Saturdays, June through September. So I'm not sure right now what the first Saturday of June is in 2022, but it'll be that. And we have them pretty faithfully. Occasionally we've had to have one canceled due to, weather or, volunteer issues, but it's pretty regular. And honestly, even during kind of extreme heat, it's a pretty comfortable place to be because of those updrafts that we talked about. We have a shade canopy that we set up, and there's this kind of constant breeze coming up out of the valley from sort of the flight pen area towards our viewpoint. And we always have some cold, water and stuff in a cooler, and we just relax and sit there all day and look for condors. And that's 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. But we'll send out reminders closer to that time. I mean, that's a little ways off. It's hard to believe it right now, but Bitter Creek can get brutal extreme weather. Like the same spot where Daniel's standing can be over 100 degrees in the summer and covered in snow in the winter.
Yeah.
The roads can be closed. It's a lovely looking spot, but it can be very extreme. I did some work out there with Fish and Wildlife back in 2010, and the first time I went out, I got hailed on in April.
Yeah, we can definitely get some extreme weather here. And yeah, the condors, they can handle that shift pretty well. They do just fine in the snow, rain, and the heat. And
condors, like many vultures, use I'm going to mispronounce it, but urohydrosis, to cool off, which, we exude disgusting stuff through our skin called sweat to cool off. They be on their legs to cool off. And it's really, really effective. And if you ever see a picture of a condor with the kind of chalky gray legs, that is because of their practice. Their skin is actually a little bit more pink than that.
Yeah, and sometimes you might see a condor with some white speckling or mottling down its back. And though that can be a sign of old age in a condor, often it's lets you know that condor roosts a little bit lower on the tree than the other ones.
Yeah.
And yeah, when we do workups down here and you got one of these birds in your lap, they can sometimes they get a little warm and they try and cool themselves off and cool you off right there with them. It's always fun when I get home. My dogs love that smell.
I imagine. We've got a question. What's the best way to deal with condors if they start doing damage to someone's property? Oh, I think that we lost the connection to Daniel briefly. Let me see. Yeah, it looks like he's dropped out of the meeting. His bandwidth's been having problems. Hopefully he'll join again in just a second. I know from working with the Fish and Wildlife, there's a couple ways that you can deal with condors doing damage to somebody's property. One thing is to just avoid anything that attracts them. A lot of times when you see properties getting damaged by condors, they're properties that people have had out water for wildlife, and sometimes even spots where there's been some people have been known to bring carcasses off the road, drag them up onto their property to attract condors or vultures. And yeah, you'll attract condors and vultures and other scavengers, and then they'll get bored and they'll look for something else to pick at. So the first thing I would say is don't do things to attract wildlife. Daniel says he'll be right back. So yeah, don't do things to attract wildlife. And then they often say, to kind of make noises to scare them away and flush them. There's certain sprinklers that you can attach to your house that are motion activated. That's Daniel. I'm gonna make him the co-host again. Thanks for your patience while we deal with this this first time doing this tour and all of the technical issues.
Okay. Yeah, sorry about that.
We got a question. What's the best way to deal with condors if they start doing damage to someone's property? I would start by not having things that attract them, like food and water, that people can sort of make noise to scare them away, that there's certain sprinklers, but I'd love to get more specific from you.
Yeah, what you're saying there is spot on though. First step, don't do things that will attract them, right? Don't put food out for them, don't leave water out for them. But they're curious birds, we all live in their habitat, right? That they've been here for millennia. We've been here for centuries, and so they're going to go where they go. If it looks like a good spot to forage from, or to chill, or to hang out, right? And they're curious birds, so they can cause some damage to property if they get around. So yeah, don't have things out to attract them. If they do show up, like Helen said, you can try and haze them away, clap at them, maybe kind of flush them, yell at them. Turn the hose on and spray them with some water. I've heard reports though that when it's hot out, sometimes the birds seem to enjoy it rather than it driving them away. But yeah, condors and humans, as the populations grow, right, they're gonna be around each other more and more often and interact. So we've got to do our part to try and keep these birds wild, and to respect them if they do show up at our properties, right? And to know that, you know, they've been here, they're just doing what condors do, and, you know, try our best to make those places sort of unattractive to them, right? They're not going to want to land at your house if every time they do, you're coming out and clapping and screaming and shooing them away or hitting them with some water. But yeah, I'm sure you guys have seen different examples, right, where condors have gotten to people's property and caused damage, or you know, done that urohydrolysis all over the place. And yeah, it can be a hazard for us, and it can be a hazard for these birds. So yeah, if they come around, haze them. I know Bear Valley Springs and Stallion Springs, Tehachapi, those areas get a lot of condor activity. So if you're in those neighborhoods, by the mailboxes, we've hung up some flyers that give you some information on hazing. You can email us at hoppermountain@fws.gov if you've got some specific questions, or maybe you've had some strategies you've tried that have been successful you'd like to share.
And Daniel,
yeah, we really, yeah.
I shared the article that the Fish and Wildlife did recently on what to do if the California condor visits your home. That's in the chat if people want to click on it and open it before this ends. That has a lot of great information that was put together by Fish and Wildlife.
Yeah, and there's something else that might not be on that list. If California condors come to your home, grab your phone, grab your camera, take pictures, take videos, you know, get them out of there, but enjoy them. You know, it's pretty special with only about 100 in Southern California, covering over 10,000 square miles. If they pick your few thousand square feet to come hang out on, you know, count yourself blessed. You got to see a condor so close, but enjoy it for a moment, and then yeah, shoo it away, and let them stay wild and free.
Wonderful, thank you. Any other questions? And feel free to repeat. I think that I've gotten everything that people have typed in, but you know, as new chat comes in, I might have pushed it out of the way. So feel free to repeat if I didn't get to yours.
Yeah, please share if you got questions or comments. And yeah, thank you all for joining us and coming out. You know, it's hard to really get the whole vibe, you know, through the computer screen, but I'm pretty thankful that we have this technology, you know, where we can stay connected, you know, even when we're split apart. So yeah, I really want to thank you guys for coming out, enjoying your time. Let's see if I can catch this condor flying in real quick. Where'd you go, bud? There he is.
Whoa, nice one.
Just in time.
I'm deeply impressed that you're managing to do the telephone video through a spotting scope on a Zoom call, Daniel. I just want you to know.
Just binoculars.
Binoculars. Okay.
Yeah.
Still. Thank you for your work on this.
Yeah. And yeah, as I was saying, sorry again, yeah, thank you all for coming out, supporting these birds, supporting this habitat, supporting the Friends group and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and all the other partners involved with California Condor Recovery Program, right? And remember, this is your land. These are your public lands, right? We've all got some of the best front yards and backyards in the world across our country. So find some national parks, recreation areas, refuges, and get out and enjoy your land.
Excellent.
Well, I can stick around for another 10 minutes if we'd like. Yeah, just let me know.
I'm happy to hang out and get to see Bitter Creek for another couple minutes. So I'd say we can just be here, and if anybody thinks of a question, shoot it out, and otherwise we're just gonna enjoy the view and see if there's any more close-up condor action. I can actually see those condors next to the flight pen, even without the binoculars now. Two little.
Oh yeah, right down in here.
Yeah. I mean, not in any detail, but
Yeah.
still, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, even using the binoculars, it's hard to tell. And they're not sitting the right way for me to catch any wing tags.
Oh, I had somebody ask if the Santa Barbara Zoo sponsored this Zoom, and yeah, actually, the Santa Barbara Zoo did let us use their Zoom for this. The Friends group usually uses Google Meet, and it's not as good for these large scale kind of tours and webinars and stuff. So they were kind enough to let us use theirs. So thank you, Santa Barbara Zoo.
Yeah, big thanks. Santa Barbara Zoo is one of our most crucial partners in condor recovery. They have biologists that work in the field with us. They have a nest biologist that monitors the wild breeding condors. They provide support for our Condor Kids education program. They have ambassador birds and mentor birds at the Santa Barbara Zoo. Yeah, they've just been incredible partners. We recognize them a couple years ago for their outstanding work in conservation with condors, with snowy plovers, and a lot of other species. So if you have a chance, go visit Santa Barbara Zoo. They've got condors on display, as well as a lot of other species. And
Yeah, they have a
the
wonderful
work that they do and what they show on exhibit is just a small fraction of what they're doing for conservation outside of the zoo.
Yeah.
Yes,
As with most zoos, they use their exhibits as a way to fundraise to pay for conservation. So it's amazing all of the stuff that zoos do that we don't see just when you visit.
Yeah, and I assume everyone here is on the email list with the Friends group to find out about this event. But yeah, make sure you're on that email list so that when we do start doing in-person tours again, hopefully, maybe as soon as next month, that you can be on that list and get your name in that hat to come out and join us out here or at Hopper Mountain.
Yeah, and you can find that at our website, which is just www.friendsofcondors.org. I'll put it in the chat.
And I got two questions for everyone that's still here. I want to know, would you want me to do this again? Did you enjoy this virtual tour? Would you like me to try and do this at Hopper or here at Bitter Creek again? And then the second thing I'd like to ask you all is, what was something that you learned about or enjoyed today or about condors in general?
We're getting a
at
lot
least
of
one yes again.
Yes, both places. Yes, please. So yeah, I think that this was a success.
Hey, Jill's here. Hi, Jill.
Like to see Hopper.
Hi, Daniel.
Jill's one of the members, and I think she's on the board, and she's just one of the key volunteers with the Friends group. She's helped with a lot of our outreach and education and monitoring and all sorts of stuff. And she's just a really cool person.
Oh, thanks, Daniel. Back at you.
Whoop, whoop.
A bunch of yeses, more close-ups if possible. Would love to see more virtual tours. So definitely a lot of kind of yes to people would like to see this type of thing again.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, close-ups are hard with condors. But I'll do my best, and I'll make sure to bring the binos and use them well. Try and use them well.
Someone said they learned about AC9, didn't know this, and asexual reproduction. Someone else said, do we need to contribute for better gear? Another definite yes to doing this again.
All right, hold on. I think we might have to add this to our regular repertoire, Helen.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that this is a great way of getting more people access. Even though it's not quite as good as an in-person tour, I think that it's a lot more accessible for folks. So yeah, I look forward to doing more of these.
It's fantastic for those who can't get out of the house.
Yeah.
I'm now bedridden, so this is wonderful.
I'm glad that we could bring you along. Yeah, and there's a lot of people too who, live too far away to visit. So
yeah, I saw Susan joined us from San Diego. That's where I grew up. But yeah,
nice.
A little bit of a drive for a tour. Yeah, but I'm really glad you all joined us. This was a lot of fun.
Someone sent a link to a smartphone and binocular adapter thing that attaches your smartphone to your binoculars.
Yeah, I've got one of those for the spotting scope that I can bring out with me too next time.
Yeah, we'll experiment with.
Yeah, it can be tough going in and out of that, but yeah, it definitely will help us get some up close shots. Thanks.
I see a GoPro question. GoPro can't stream live. We have a couple kind of GoPro type things for Daniel for when he records. We got him a 360. So sometimes you'll see 360 videos getting posted, which are super fun. But yeah, the GoPro doesn't stream live, so we wouldn't be able to use it for this live tour type of format. But yeah, I appreciate everybody kind of being here with us for our first try of this and kind of figuring out what works and what doesn't and seeing what the, kind of challenges are. And hopefully next one will be even more streamlined and, effective, and we'll even get condors closer.
Yeah.
And we're happy to do it. This is sort of what we do. The Friends group is all about education and outreach, and that is Daniel's job description. So, we're really pleased to have been able to bring you out and let you see a little bit of your backyard. Yeah, someone says we could intersperse close-up footage. I might try and find more videos to share for the when Daniel is traveling between sites of close-ups of condors, so that people can get that even if it's not in the live bits. That's a really good. Yeah. That's a really good point. Thank you, Sanjay. Oh, those mountains are beautiful.
Yeah, there's a bird soaring out there too. Not sure if we can see it.
Yeah, we're going to send out this. We've been recording the presentation, and we're going to be sending it out afterwards. Yeah, we can see that. Condor flying in the left of the screen. Just above that cloud line.
Yeah. That bird's pretty far away, but yeah. I love that we can still see it. Way out over the clouds. All right, well, we're coming up at 1 o'clock now.
Yep. It's been a pleasure, and thank you guys so much for joining us. And make sure you're on our mailing list, and we will let you know if we're doing one of these again. And we'll let you know when we are able to do live events again. And I think that we might have lost Daniel, so I think I'll just say goodbye for both of us. And I look forward to meeting you all in person someday.
Right on, yeah.